All right, good evening. Paul's the first one in the night. Where is Chuck?
Ooh, yeah.
Chuck slacking a little bit. Walkabout games. Chris Long. Now, Chris Long loves this stuff. I haven't seen him get into any play with anything, but he loves stuff. Mikey, good to see you. Terry, welcome to our kick around. We're gonna, now Terry's comment to me was, "Oh yeah, we'll chat about Napoleonic stuff." Look at Hunter Chuck, and we're going to. We've, I told Alan before you jumped on, I said I hadn't had a chance to figure out, because I don't know a lot about you. I mean, I recognize the name right away, but I don't know enough about you because I don't think I dug into some of the systems that you've been part of, which we're going to talk a little bit about that too. But we got some questions. Do you by chance have anything that you may want to show? Do you have any images or anything you want to show, or are we just going to chit chat?
I think we're just going to chit chat for the most part, because
okay.
I think your unboxing video, I think, went over the components pretty well, and I've got it laid out on the table behind me.
That's what I was going to say. He's got it right there behind him. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, mine's
yeah. If anybody wants to look at anything close, like stuff like this, then.
I'm telling you what, this box just when I opened it, I was like, "Gee, many Christmas, man!" I mean, you have packed so much into that box, and you're telling me that box is going to be, would you say, 20 millimeters higher, the actual box?
Yeah. So after the prototype was made, the printer said, it's not going to fit, so we need to make the box bigger. So we added 20 millimeters to the box so that everything would fit.
So for those,
it's packed to the gills.
This is Unclaimed Victory, Fuentes de Onoro. I got that right? Yeah, I'm going to do that. Speak German. Onoro. Okay, all right. So we were discussing this the other night.
Reflection.
This is so Portugal and then into Spain. Was this on the border of Spain, or was this still in Portugal? Or
it's right on the border of Portugal and Spain. So Fuentes de Onoro is in Spain itself, and then it's just a little bit, like a couple of 3 kilometers to Portugal, to enter Portugal. So the Fortress of Almeida, which is the kind of objective of the campaign, is in Portugal.
Okay.
So yeah, it's right there. Yeah.
And
so kind of the history there is the Portuguese and Spanish, of course, were long-term enemies and had built some border fortresses to oppose each other, and there was some fighting back and forth between the British and the French over those fortresses.
Yeah, I was about to say Portuguese and Spanish didn't like each other, and now let's throw the French and the Brits in there. So I'm thinking of progression from First Victories, where I was used to seeing Juno, and now Messina's on here. Now, and we were trying to figure this one out the other night. Where did Messina? Okay, where does he come into this picture? Was he already in the theater in Spain somewhere, or did Napoleon send him? How did he show up here?
Well, you have to go back to the 1809 campaign. So, in the 1809 campaign, Messina was basically in retirement, and Napoleon called him out of retirement to lead the advance on a small town called Landshut, which was coming into the flank of the Austrians. And he did pretty well there, and then advanced, of course, and fought at Wagram, where he was brilliant at Wagram, even though he had been injured from I believe it was a fall from a horse, if I recall correctly, and was riding around in a carriage at Wagram. And because of his performance at Wagram, Napoleon thought he would be a good man to lead the third invasion of Portugal, which this is the third invasion that the French have attempted since 1807. So he got, he was, Massena was pretty old at this point and was frankly he definitely past his prime, right? And he'd been Dick Cheney'd by Napoleon himself, shot in the face with a shotgun in a hunting accident, hunting rabbits.
I was going to say, is that what I think it means?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he was shot in the face and lost an eye from that. So he was not happy to go to Spain. and Portugal.
It was
And he
not
brought his mistress with him. Yeah, famously brought his mistress with him, dressed up as a hussar to kind of conceal her identity, which of course fooled no one. And he's been the subject of many jokes and recriminations because of that. But he actually, and you'll see that in the history book, kind of the history of the third invasion of Portugal, somewhat briefly, and his performance there. And his performance was actually really, really good for the materials he had at hand, other than the fiasco of Busaco, where he just went forward and didn't
So I'm going to see that
reconnaissance. Yeah, that's the history book. Yeah, so that's going to be in there, the history, and that's a lot of that's taken from Massena's biographer, a fellow named Koch, who was aide de camp to Massena's son, or I think it was his son. It could have been his grandson. I can't recall, but he was closely related to the family and had access to the private papers.
Well,
and
I've
all
always
that kind of stuff.
understood that because I think about Napoleon in Egypt and the work on the stuff with the pyramids and things like that. I mean, he of all the leaders throughout history, and of course I'm thinking wartime leaders, the commanders on the field. Napoleon's is the one that I like the most. I don't know enough about him. I mean, I've not read enough, but there's just something about him. And I've always heard the stories about what he did for France in things like the library, the economy, some of the stuff that he built. So now we're going to get way general here real quick. If he was doing all these good things, what was he doing that the world hated him so much for?
Well, I think mainly it was so he was a really good organizer. He was a really good military man. I mean, he's tops. I think the only possible person I would ever rate as a better commander than Napoleon would possibly be Hannibal, and that's because Hannibal maintained an army in Italy for how many years with virtually no support from his country. So, but otherwise, in terms of a strategist and an operational organizer and tactical battlefield commander, I mean, I think Napoleon is tops. So when he was first consul, he was really in charge of a lot of reforms, and so you mentioned some of those. He was also, responsible for a lot of economic reforms, the creation of the Bank of France, and the ability to borrow from that bank and get France's finances in order, which was, of course, the whole reason for the French Revolution and a lot of problems with during the French Revolution and the Directory period. And then everybody's heard of the Code Napoleon, right? Which, I mean, he didn't write all these things, but he was very much responsible for helping push them through and making sure they got through the whole process and into law. I think where he starts to run astray is
used his name to push it out and get it through the
not just his name, but being present at the meetings and making sure things continued, even if he wasn't directly contributing to the meetings, he was there and he would pipe up when he had an interest in a particular subject.
Right.
But just getting it through the process and shepherding everything through the process of making laws and bringing it to fruition, which no one else during the revolution or the Directory were able to do that. So that's a major accomplishment for him. And then, of course, the Concordat was a big one.
He was also, I guess you kind of got to be if you want to be the leader on the top-notch leader on both ends of the spectrum. He was also capable of flipping the switch and getting vicious when he needed to get vicious, I believe. I mean, So the cannons and I don't know what the town was during, I guess, the French Revolution or whatever. I mean, that's some tough decisions to make, and he did them, and I'd see where it got him. So,
well, that was I think you're talking about the whiff of grape shot there, which was in Paris. So if you don't know, the French Revolution was not just one revolution, right? It was a series of uprisings which occurred over most of them in 1792, 1793, and then, but also in 1794, which overthrew Robespierre, and then the coup of Fructidor, which overthrew some of the other, the reactionaries from the coup of Thermidor after Robespierre. So, and then there was another one after that, and that's where Napoleon got the whiff of grape shot and was able to. Well, I guess that was part of the coup of Fructidor, right, where he did his cannons in the street and shot down the crowd and put an end to that without the government being completely overthrown.
I tell you, it takes some guts to. So I always, one of the things that I don't think I've ever asked anybody or I've ever read about it or anybody's ever answered me. When he comes back before the 100 days, first off, how many? Okay, well, 100 days. I guess 100 days. So from the time he landed back on the continent to the time he put an army on the move into towards the Labella or towards the Waterloo campaign, how much time was there in that, and how in the hell did this guy get that large of a force armed and supplied in that little short period?
Well, so yeah, I mean, he put it together really quickly, and you can partly tell, and this is not the army of 1812. It's not the army of 1813. It's not even the army of 1814. A lot of the troops are partially equipped. They're wearing different uniforms. So there's a number of the cuirassier units that went to war there with only partially equipped with cuirasses, the armored plates for the chest and the back.
Right.
And so it was kind of a cobbled together army. So in kind of the background of that is in 1814, the Bourbons, of course, took over, and the finances were in terrible shape at that point. So what's the first thing you do in peace after a long period of wartime? You cut the army, right? So in order to save money, they cut the army drastically, and of course that was very much impacted all the officers that were not even on half pay, but just completely out of pay. So they were disaffected, and then also the soldiers as well had been furloughed and having trouble finding work, and there was also a bad harvest that year due to the thing was there that volcano over in Eastern Asia or whatever
Oh,
that created
Krakatoa.
the little ice age,
Yep.
which created some bad harvest there and caused a lot more discontent. So all that discontent kind of fed into him coming back and being able to raise an army fairly quickly. And the Bourbons, when they came back, they were never really that popular. They were basically forced upon the French people. So they didn't really have the same backing. And the Bourbons weren't particularly cruel to anybody. They were holding off the revenge party a little bit in terms of keeping the White Terror at bay. But of course, after the end of the 1815 campaign, then Louis had no choice but to let them have their way, and that's when the White Terror and the Bonapartists fled France, and some of them actually went to Texas.
Oh, really?
Form a colony on the Sabine River, which didn't last very long, and then they went back to France after the moratorium.
Okay, in his endeavors to spread their culture, we'll say it that way. Because it's easy, I think about World War II and the Germans spreading east and the Germans spreading west and north or whatever. Is there a point in Napoleon's military rule in his command where if he had stopped, things may have worked out successfully for him? Where did he go wrong? Where did he push himself too far?
I think the answer there is it takes two to tango. So I think some historians believe this was kind of the end of the second 100 Years' War between Britain and France, and I think between those two powers, there was not going to be any peace until one was completely victorious over the other. And so if you get to, and this is all about, so in 1802 there was the Peace of Amiens, right? So the British sabotaged the negotiations immediately by sending a guy that was a virulently anti-French and virulently anti-Napoleon, and let him negotiate the terms of the treaty for the British. And Napoleon, of course, was, I think one of his big weaknesses was diplomacy. He was kind of like had a zero-sum vision. I'm not sure he really believed in like the win-win kind of situation where you're happy with this and I'm happy with that, so we're okay and we can live with that in the future. So I think he kind of had a view that if he gave anything up, then he'd be kind of seen somehow as losing.
Right.
So that was one of his failings. But in terms of like the Peace of Amiens, there, which was ratified. It began to break down in 1803, and part of that was because Napoleon had started doing things in areas that were not technically stipulated by the treaty itself. So they were dabbling in the politics of Switzerland and northern Italy, and those weren't specifically covered in the treaty. But the British kind of said, "Well, you're kind of breaking the spirit of the agreement." So and so you can argue on both sides, who started the war up again. And that's the kind of thing where I think the two sides of the takes two to tango there, and between those two powers, you're not going to really have peace
Yeah,
between the two until one side is victorious.
everybody talks about Russia, trade space for time or whatever, but what is it? I mean, why? I mean, you would think that nations afterwards would just say, no, let's just leave that alone. But obviously, that didn't work. I mean,
Yeah.
And what? Well, okay. So how many coalitions were there formed against Napoleon during his reign?
6 altogether. And well, I guess it depends on if you count versus Napoleon or versus France. So, like the first coalition was against the French Republic, right? The revolutionaries. And then the second coalition was in 1798-99 when Napoleon was off in Egypt. So those weren't technically against Napoleon, but there were six coalitions altogether. And then, with the last one resulting in Waterloo.
Well,
but as far as the Tsar, I think the Tsar. So of course, going back to Russia, so France and Russia were not necessarily enemies at that point. So
Right.
and Tsar Paul I was relatively friendly towards France, which the British were not happy about that, and they helped to get Tsar Paul assassinated by the British ambassador to Russia paying the conspirators to do that. So that's quite meddling in somebody else's affairs.
I love these little details that you don't. These are things that the average person, like me, just the average gamer that loves to play some Napoleonic stuff here and there. You don't get these. I'm not the reader that I know, like Alan and McMurray and Todd and Raw. I'm not the reader of books. Like I said, the last thing I read was Lee's Lieutenants a couple years ago, and I read them all three of them in 3 months, and that's probably the last book I read. It's too busy reading rules for me to be able to read other stuff. But I'm always, it's like Egypt. I don't comprehend. What did he? Okay, here's what I know about Egypt. He went over there. He pretty much whooped, I guess, the Mamluks, and then he inventoried some pyramids, and then he had to flee and left his army over there. So, one, what purpose did Egypt serve? 2, what happened to that army? And who did he lose with that army that was?
So he took so going to Egypt was not 100% Napoleon's idea. It had been kind of tossed around by various French authorities before and during the revolution, and part of that was because they were losing their colonies overseas to the British naval activity. Right, one by one, they lost Canada, and they're losing other colonies from British naval activity, and so they thought that as a possible alternative colony to what was happening, in the Western Hemisphere, right? So Napoleon had also, kind of globbed onto that, and Talleyrand, the French diplomat, was instrumental in kind of pushing that, and some of it was. You hear people say that it was to get Napoleon out of, politics and where he couldn't cause any harm. And there's probably some truth in that, but that's just one little thing. But part of it was the desire to establish a colony. And there was, of course, friction with the Turks because of that, as you can imagine, because that's their territory. Even though the Mamluks were not, at that time, were not really obeying the Sultan. They were basically setting up their own little kingdom. So Napoleon and the French were kind of pitching that as well. We'll restore Egypt for you to your rightful rule, and we'll pay fealty to you. So that's partly how that all got started. And of course, before that, Napoleon was in command of the army of England, which was supposed to invade England, but of course that was really going nowhere. So Egypt came up, and he said, "Okay, let's go." Got all his savants together and went over there and studied the pyramids and started the whole subject of Egyptology. Found the Rosetta Stone and all that.
Yeah,
good stuff.
now see that because okay, so now here's where we start to hit on things that pull me in because I watch a lot of documentaries and people. What's his name? Hawe Zamas, Dr. Hawe Zamas in Egypt.
Mhm.
Anything I can catch him on, I like to watch and see what he has to. And there's other people too studying just an intriguing. I'm curious. Are a lot of the? I mean, I don't know how much we have out there today, but I know there was a bunch for a long time. Little French colonies that were spread out all over the world. Are those due to what the Napoleon effect, or is a lot of that stuff just later?
There was some of it. So after 1850, well, after 1815, there was an exodus, right? So a large number of them ended up in the United States and Philadelphia. And if you go look at the architecture of downtown Philadelphia, it's very much looks like Paris. A lot of the buildings have that French architecture of that period. And so Joseph Bonaparte went there, uh, and supposedly Ney did, although that's false. And even before that, Jerome Bonaparte had gone to Philadelphia and married Betsy Patterson against Napoleon's wishes. So, and he went back to France, and Napoleon forced him to get divorced and
Where did
get a
all these
divorce.
Bonapartes come from? I think the last Napoleonic book that had anything to do with Napoleon that I read was many, many years ago, and it was the love letters between Napoleon and Josephine.
Mhm.
And I mean, I can't even remember, but I got to admit, it was intriguing when I was reading it about that, because I mean, I know the guy loved the woman to death, but I, don't think, was she the right fit? I don't know, but he was, granted, he was doing his thing too, but he was still, it was like she was the number one thing. And from what I gather, she was the number one thing in his life, no matter where he was, even though I'm sure he did his thing. Big course.
Well, so one thing that happened when Napoleon went off to Egypt there is he found out that Josephine had cheated on him with some captain, and so then he started taking lovers too, and had basically had lovers after that, and fathered several children to various women during his escapades until he got married to Marie Louise in 1810 and had his legitimate heir.
She was the Austrian princess, right?
Yeah, she was the Austrian princess. Yeah.
Yeah, and that what a weird situation for that poor child, because I mean, I know Austria and he were sort of compatible for the longest time, but he fought them an awful lot too, didn't he? I mean,
so France and Austria were traditional enemies going back hundreds of years. It wasn't until like the 7 Years' War that Prussia came on the scene and started causing everybody a lot of trouble, and that they allied at that point and they were I wouldn't say fairly well aligned in the 7 Years' War, but they were at least, your enemy is my enemy aligned. And they had maintained somewhat friendly relations after that. And of course, Louis XVI had married Marie Antoinette, an Austrian princess, who was the sister of the Kaiser Francis the First, or no, Joseph the Second, I think, when the Napoleonic War started.
Yeah.
And so there was some relationship there, but still the French people and the Austrian people didn't trust each other and didn't really get along. And that's one of the reasons Marie Antoinette was so vilified, was because she was an Austrian.
All the bloodlines, especially when you get to World War One, the early 20th century, all the bloodlines that were spread across different countries in reigning power, that I'll never grasp that one. And of course, it all stems from what's her name in England. I mean, I can't. It's
Victoria.
Queen Victoria. Yeah. Queen Victoria's kids went all over the place. But yeah, you even look at the Prussian generals and German generals in World War II, and a lot of them, you see the same names you see in the Napoleonic period, the Bülows and Lutzows and all kinds of names that are just the same families that have been basically aristocrats for hundreds of years and following the same military tradition.
Wow. So that brings up, like, of course, obviously, when you talk about to the general populace, when you say Napoleon greatest battles, obviously Waterloo is going to come up number one. But then a lot of people that game the system, like I know Wagram and I know Jena Arstadt. I know there's like probably 5 or 6, well, first off, the stuff you put out, no freaking idea. The only thing I knew about that is the Sharps show on TV. I didn't know, I knew that the British and the French were in Portugal. I knew the British and French were in Spain, but it wasn't something that I read a lot about or knew much about, like I say, other than watching that series. But
yeah, it's more of a UK audience, I think, would be familiar with those.
Sure. Now I'm going to hear off the top of your head, which I got a feeling you're probably going to know anyhow. How many engagements, titled battles from the time he came into power to the time he was shipped away for the last time? How many major engagements did the French army under his reign fight in?
Oh, the whole French army, or just Napoleon? But
anything that was
French
under
army.
his command. I mean, under his reign.
Well, under his reign, there would literally be. Well, I think he himself fought in over 60 major battles.
Oh my God!
And but there were battles going on all over the place, in Spain and Central Europe, and some of those were under his command, and some of them were not. So just probably, I'd say off the top of my head, 200 to 300 battles during the period. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm interested in the period. Is just there's just so much going on, and not just in France, but just European wide and worldwide. Really, there's just stuff going on all over the place.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I mean, he was. It would outside, other than I guess Russia, because everybody knows, the story of Russia and what that did to him. Was he ever in any other theater? Was he ever struggling to keep the troops paid or supplied or whatever in any other theater?
Oh, in Spain for sure. Spain was very difficult. So, oh yeah, so Spain. So I think Henri Lechac, the historian, which he has a lot of really nice books with really great illustrations. I think he said Spain was a combination of grandeur drenched in poverty. So basically, and other historians have said, the Enlightenment passed Spain by, and that's probably really true. It was a very, very poor country. They had difficulty feeding their own people, let alone feeding armies that were coming to the area to either feed off the land or just purchase supplies, and that was a big problem.
Next to France, it touches France. Could he not? Was France in such despair at the time that they couldn't?
Oh no, Spain, France. It's mostly just the way the country was run. Spain partly was still fairly feudal in some ways, and it had not really modernized. And so, and a lot of land was not under cultivation in Spain. There's, if you compare today, so the Salamanca battlefield, almost none of that was under cultivation during the period, but now it's all fully cultivated, and they just, all the land was either owned by the church or owned by large landowners that didn't do any of the work themselves, of course, and everything was done by hand, right? So, for example, I think in Andalusia, something like half the male population were day laborers, those guys you see down at Home Depot, just waiting for some guy to come by and give them a job for the day. And so that's that's just a staggering amount of dislocated labor force. And so when the French invaded, the thing that happens during any invasion and during a long occupation is all trade with the outside world stops. And so without the influx of trade and the influx of treasure ships that the Spanish were really dependent upon, their economy just kind of slowly spirals down out of control, and more people get hungry, more and more people feed the guerrilla movement, and just makes it more difficult.
Is that what
so basically
talking about right there? The continental system, is that what we're talking about, or?
Partly. I'm not sure it destroyed France economically. So the continental system was, I think, one of Napoleon's failures and one of his zero-sum kind of gains, where he was trying to get all the trade to go to France, so it would benefit France and not necessarily benefit everybody else. And of course, that one-sided stuff makes the other side, of course, unhappy, which it did all throughout Europe, right, when the continental system got introduced. But anyways, back to Spain. So So basically, the ability to feed off the land for an army, and that's either through forced requisition or actually purchasing food with real hard cash. Um, it has to have a certain density of population, and that was true for Russia, Poland, and Spain. And so in those areas where the population was relatively low, there weren't enough people farming and accumulating food for a large army to live off of. So even if you were buying the grain, it just wasn't there, because there was nobody, making enough food and storing enough food to feed that many people. But in Italy and Central Europe, particularly in the German area along the Rhine, there was plenty of population density, rich farmland, and plenty of food to be able to live off the land. But as soon as they got into Poland and Spain and Russia, that kind of disappeared. But even in Russia, it kind of varies a little bit. So like kind of Western Russia, which is really part of Poland at that time, um, was more sparsely populated. So Lithuania used to be part of Poland in those areas. But then when you get into White Russia and further east towards Moscow, the population density goes up a little bit, and it gets a little bit easier for them to live off the land, at least until Moscow burns down, right? But
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well,
so
what
that's where they had troubles with supplies.
what did Napoleon want from these countries, from these invasions? What did he want to happen? What was he expecting to happen, or what was he trying to spread?
The main thing is compliance with his vision of how Europe should be.
Yeah,
And
unified
part of
Europe.
that, what's that? A
A
unified Europe to
unified
some,
Europe.
yeah, to some extent, yeah. And then, but with a goal towards defeating the British, right? So I mean, he tried to build a fleet, and of course that didn't work out at Trafalgar.
Mhm.
And he could have probably continued pursuing building fleets, but the British were always trying to, you know, bring some backdoor army to fight him. So he really didn't have much choice in terms of to raise the army and fight the Austrians when they come in, or the Prussians or the Russians or whoever was trying to pick up the torch to keep fighting the French.
It seems to me like the British somehow, some way, always had the upper hand on him.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I wouldn't say that. I mean, things were pretty bleak for them prior to the victories in Rolasa and Vimiero. And that's one of the reasons and I kind of go over that a little bit in Unclaimed Victory and also in First Victories. But the British were really upset with the Convention of Sintra, which kind of signed the peace to get the French army out of Portugal. And that was partly because they just had been defeated so many times, other than the small Battle of Maida in Italy, and then in Egypt in 1802 when they had gone there and beat the British or beat the French at Canopy, and got the French army. Which goes back to your earlier question: is that's how they got out? Is eventually the British came in there, and with the help of the Mamelukes and beat the British army, and they were evacuated out of Egypt.
Yeah, it seems like the Brits were spread all over the place. Of course, they always have been.
Yeah.
Almost all.
They have a far-flung empire.
Yeah,
and it's a two-edged sword for them. So one of the reasons they didn't have such a great land army is that they had these garrisons all over the place, and never more than 2 or 3 battalions were together at any one time. So they didn't have a large depth of generals that could command large bodies of troops, and it was really hard to find people that were capable of doing that, and that created a lot of problems for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Strategically placed around the world.
Yeah.
So let's flip the table here. Alan, you see what I'm doing, right? Because in a minute here, we're going to turn the corner and we're going to go down the Terry Doherty road.
Oh, this is great. I'm getting a great history lesson.
I love it. So
There's so much to
the
talk about.
Napoleonic period is weak in my structure, as we know, ACW. But go ahead. This is great.
Let's leave. All right, so let's go to the other side here. I mean, there are so many nations that either complied for a little while and fought on his side. Let's hit this first before I do this. Okay, I would love to know this, because when I start talking about elite units that weren't French, good, strong units that he got from other countries. The only ones that ever crossed my mind are Poniatowski's, the Lancers, the Polish Lancers.
Yeah.
What else did he have? What other forces did he have from other countries that were just supercharged?
So there was the Tirailleurs course, which he used in the 1809 campaign, and then what was the other unit that was with them? I don't have it on the tip of my tongue at the moment, but there was a couple of Tirailleur units from Italy and Corsica that were considered elite, and they were part of the guard at one time. Then he had also got in the Dutch Lancers in 1810. So, going back to what Napoleon's kind of plans were and what he was doing to upset the British, kind of annexing other parts of territory adjacent to him. So he annexed Holland in 1810. He had plans to annex part of Spain, but never got there. And then he created the Kingdom of Westphalia out of former Hanover, which was British territory, which is where the British kings come from after George I. So the Dutch Lancers became part of the Guard, the famous Red Lancers. They also had the 3rd Grenadiers of the Guard, which is also a Dutch unit, and they were dressed just like the Grenadiers of the Guard, except for they had red facings on their chest, so they're fairly distinctive. Who else did they have? I'm sure some of the guys online have some input on that.
I'm waiting. I keep waiting for Paul to pop up and say something. Swiss regiments.
Yeah, Swiss regiments. They weren't really part of the Guard, but they were there. I think they were less reliable under Napoleon. So there's a lot of Swiss units go to Spain and they promptly desert to the British in large numbers.
That brings up another question too. So I mean, how many of these foreign countries that he consumed troops or troops joined his army? Of all these foreign countries he picked up, I mean, I'm sure there had to be, we're kind of on the fence 50-50 here. Of all of the ones that he had that fought in his army from time to time, who were the worst possible threats to his army being in his army?
Probably if they were, so every time he conquered a country, he kind of recruited some guys. So there was actually a regiment of Portuguese that were taken from the old army that he took out of Portugal, and they had deserted. Quite a few guys deserted. I don't know if they were really a threat to Napoleon, but the guys that stayed with the unit actually marched all the way to Moscow and back, and fought at Borodino, which I think is fairly impressive. There was also some Prussians who got recruited, and they went to Borodino, and they were probably, as far as auxiliaries, I would say the least reliable, but still, they're a little bit more professional. And I think it's a little different than today, where people were a little more mercenary. They wouldn't really think it as betraying their country to go actually serve in somebody else's army unless they were actually fighting each other at the time. So there's actually a British general who fought for the French during the Revolution, a guy by the name of Money is his last name, and he fought for the French up until the French declared war on the British, and then left the French army at that point and went back to England. And there were French generals that fought for Frederick the Great at times, and also large numbers of emigres that went and fought in the Russian army.
Now you just hit on something here. See, Frederick the Great, that was pre-Napoleon.
Yeah. So Frederick the Great's he takes over. I can't recall when, but he launches his first wars in the Austrian War of Succession in 1740, which lasts from 1740 to 1742, and then he fights the 7 Years' War when Austria tries to take back the territory he took from them in the War of Austrian Succession. And there's all these other wars of succession too that keep going on: the War of Bavarian Succession, the War of Spanish Succession, and all these guys are getting involved. It's like the war, sport of kings, right? All these wars, and they're just fighting all the time.
Well, so since we touched on Frederick, you always hear about the great Prussian, I don't know what they call officers academy, or the training, or their leaders. All right.
Yeah, the general staff.
Yeah, general. Thank you. Was that a Frederick thing?
No, that
Or-
comes later.
Okay, because I was saying, because where was all this wonderful command of the Prussians? I mean, granted, I like Blucher. I like the stories about him and everything.
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
he's crazy.
yeah, I mean, he's aggressive. Whether or not he's the best general, I don't know. I don't know enough about him, but it seems like they're always around at certain times. But I don't never hear the stories about the great leadership ability of them. But they must have done something right.
Well, mainly, so you got to go all the way back to the Wars of the Reformation to get Prussia's story. So Prussia was a nobody at that point, and he was just an elector for the Holy Roman Emperor, and they didn't have any kind of army. So most of his people were Protestants, but the elector was a diehard Catholic and had loyalty to the emperor in Austria. And so during the Wars of the Reformation, both armies marched back and forth, and because the Catholic armies were going over Protestant territory, they were terrible to the people, and because the elector was a Catholic, the Protestant armies were terrible to the people as well. So he started to raise a standing army at that point and began drilling them and drilling them and drilling them and drilling them, and became basically the best standing army in Europe. And it wasn't very large, but it was extremely well drilled. And so eventually Frederick the Great came to power, and he was basically, well, I've got this great army, let's do something with it. And they had started that the aristocracy had that military tradition for a long time and continued it, and they just had a superb officer corps,
Right.
than compared to the other nations, and just much better trained than the other nations.
Yeah, and it seems like that, that Prussian leadership carried and carried and carried. I mean,
Mhm.
the Germans benefited a lot from it. World War II. I mean,
Yeah, it carries all
I'm
the way through World War II, that tradition. Yeah.
yeah, and I have to say in World War One they had some pretty good officers too. All right, so before we get into, I want to talk a little bit about you. I want to just go over to the other side with Wellington. Um, when we were messing around the other night, and Andrew and I were both on, we were looking at some of the leaders in the charts in this game here, and some of the familiar names we were seeing, like Picton and like that. It seems to me that unless you straighten me out here, from day one, it was always Wellington, and it was never anybody else. Or am I wrong? I mean, he was always number one.
He wasn't really number one. So the whole story of Portugal and the invasion there is Wellington had only been promoted to lieutenant general literally like a couple of weeks before he was appointed to command. So he was either the most junior lieutenant general in the army or close. So there were quite a few senior generals over the top of him, and probably the only general that probably could match his ability was John Moore. And John Moore, at that time, the reason he didn't get command of the expedition to Portugal is he was already off on an expedition to Sweden. So prior to Portugal, kind of what was going on was there was all the action over in Poland with Eylau and what was happening over there, and the British were desperately trying to find a partner to land over in Poland and fight the French there in Poland. And so they'd sent John Moore with a fleet of ships, and I can't remember how many thousand men, over to Sweden. But the Swedish king at that point was a little bit crazy and was losing his mind. So they didn't have any reliable partner that they could they could do anything with. So Wellington ended up going off to Portugal instead of John Moore. But so after the French were kicked out of Portugal in the Convention of Sintra, then Wellington and his two senior commanders, which was Dalrymple and Berard, were all recalled to England to face kind of not really a court martial, but an inquiry. And so they had an inquiry there, which kind of went through all the evidence and cited everything. And then the inquiry said, "Yeah, that's great." Didn't conclude anything. And the Duke of York said, "Well, you haven't come up with any conclusions." So they went back and concluded and say, "Yeah, everything's okay," and we're happy with that. So, but then those guys were all out of favor at that time, and so they had appointed John Moore to lead the next expedition to Portugal.
Okay, So Wellington goes because they can't get more at the time, and then it just and that just it's still, like I say, from my minimal exposure to this, from that point on, it's just like every time I hear the British, I hear Wellington.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
and it
always
is.
so. I mean, junior General Wellington Arthur Wellesley goes to Portugal. So I got to assume, because I don't know, but he obviously had to get promoted awful quick.
Yeah, there were a lot of politics involved. So Wellington's older brother was very very high up in the British government, and so when and he was governor of India for a while, and so when he went to India, he brought Wellesley over there to command the British Army, which is where Wellesley really made his first reputation, was in India, and defeating the various armies of the sepoys over there, and the Maharathas and whatnot. And India was quite I guess the best word for it would be balkanized at that point, with all these different factions, and nobody in control of India at all in one place. And the French, of course, had a colony over there as well, or attempting to form a colony. And so then when so okay, during the whole Portugal thing, the one of the things that kicked it off was the uprising in Spain after Napoleon had started taking over Spain and put Joseph on the throne. And so the Portuguese rose up at the same time, and the British were again trying to find somewhere to land on the continent. And so they initially approached the Spanish, but the Spanish didn't really want the British army on their soil, because the British and the Spanish, of course, had been long-term enemies since Spanish Armada days. And so they said no. So then they decided to land in Portugal instead. And later, Wellington's older brother again became ambassador to Spain. And so at that point, Wellington had been recalled to England, and John Moore was in command of the army in Portugal. And Wellesley's brother the ambassador had kind of convinced John Moore that he had to come to the Spanish people's rescue, even though Napoleon was coming through Spain with this army, a couple 100,000 strong, to restore the situation after the whole Balin fiasco and the retreat of Joseph's court behind the Ebro River in Spain, which is a big river that flows.
That's right, because Napoleon did end up going into Spain.
He did, yeah.
So okay, so all right, so the Napoleonic era sort of ran from the late 1700s to termination pretty much in 1815. And this is I'm going to ask one last question before we start getting into the questions that I actually have written down. Okay. So from once Napoleon's gone for the final time, which I don't know enough about. I think I watched, somebody did a movie about him on the island with the young British girl and the stories and stuff. I don't know whether any of that's accurate or not. And then him
Betsy
dying.
Balcom.
Yeah. Okay. What was the transition in France from having Napoleon to no Napoleon? How did they transition back into being, I don't know, normal? And then how long did that process take, or did it ever even get finished? I mean,
back into a republic. Back into a republic.
So yeah, back into a republic in 1830. So Louis the 18th, of course. So Louis the 16th was guillotined, of course, and Louis the 17th dies while Napoleon's in power, and then Louis the 18th becomes the heir. So Louis the 18th is the guy that ends up on the throne in 1814, and then goes back to Belgium during the 100 Days, and then comes back after the 100 Days. And so at that point, his brother Charles kind of became the leader of the White Terror. And of course, that was very bad for army officers and any Bonapartists in general. So that was where they had the mass exodus of Bonapartists from France. And that's kind of a second immigration, where they're going, all over Europe, and even to England and to the United States and other places around the world. And then after Napoleon dies, things kind of cool off a little bit. And then Charles, I believe it's Charles X, comes to the throne, and he's just a horrible ruler. Nobody likes him, and that leads to the Revolution of 1830 and the restoration the Second Republic, and Louis Napoleon.
Another
Napoleon the Third.
That country over just never.
Yeah. Well, that's why they're on the Fifth Republic now, right?
Oh, good God! Will they ever get it right?
I think they're doing pretty good now. I think they got it down.
Alan, you got anything before we start going into?
No. I mean, Terry, your wealth of knowledge. First off, just complimenting wealth of knowledge on this stuff is fantastic. I am not big on it. I've got the cursory stuff, but just listening to you is just great. And I can see why you're so detailed with the games and how much information you've put into it, which is amazing. So wonderful to hear all this stuff. It's great.
It's kind of my passion, I guess.
Yeah, we're about to find out why.
Yeah, that's where I'm leading to is to hear a little bit more about why and the details behind it, because it's really, having these systems and starting out with such detail, because you probably may have seen or not, I'm a detail oriented guy, American Civil War, GBACW, that whole thing, and some of the things that you did with this, just taking it to the level that I'm just like, oh, this is so great. The wheeling and the whole regimental commands and feeling like, you're part of reenactment there, right down at the company level, is really amazing. So, getting understanding of all that, what you've talked about with Europe, and then bringing it down to the micro level to say, here, we've got these great games that you're doing. Give us some thoughts on that. How did that get started?
The games, well, I guess probably, I don't know, 35 years ago or so now.
Well, hold on. Before we do that, because I want to lead into what Alan's talking about. Let's go way back. All right, let's go. All right. First off, when did you pick up your first game?
My first game, so that would have been when I was in probably grade school, actually. So I was I can't remember. So my stepdad was in the National Guard, and he would bring home these books with German tanks and stuff, and I'm like that. So I'm like, oh, this is really cool stuff, And then I had, of course, like the little Fortress of Navarone play set with the soldiers and stuff, if you remember that thing.
Sure.
The big Fortress of Navarone play set. And then I had some like comic books, and they had some like war games advertised in the back. And so the first one I got was just this little piece of plastic sheet with a square grid on it, and plastic planes and tanks and things like that. And then I think I was probably in 6th grade. I got Battle of the Bulge from Avalon Hill.
Why does that
and Blitzkrieg
so familiar with everybody? That game, or Panzer Leader, or Panzer Blitz? That's
Panzer Blitz.
Because that was going to be my next question. What was the first Tex encountered game? So now I'm a little shocked here. I'm a little disappointed it wasn't a Napoleonic game. Okay, so what was the first Napoleonic?
I didn't know what Napoleon was at that time.
What was the first Napoleonic game you picked up? And don't tell me Avalon Hill's Waterloo.
Let's see. I can't remember now. Got quite a few, some GDW games and SPI games and things of that nature. So,
well, you didn't dive right into monster Napoleon games, I'm sure, right?
No. I was mostly did World War II stuff to start off when I was a younger man. But then I got into Napoleonics and just found it interesting, and just kept diving in deeper and deeper and deeper. And
you found your rabbit
black hole I can't get out of.
Yeah, it's like us in ACW. It's terrible. I got games over there that people probably some people have heard of them, but not much. Okay, so all right. Okay, so that just brought me to the next question. Why Napoleonics? What happened what did you do? What did you find, or what did you play that said, this is my rabbit hole?
I think it was just initially just the whole line, column, and square thing. Just saying, oh, this is kind of cool. I can do this kind of thing, form square and charge my cavalry, and just kind of the pageantry of it. In fact, the French, in the kind of the technical terms of the period, they call the area between the two lines of battle the region of the ball. The dance.
Yeah, I'm going to bring this post back up because this is Todd. Todd's usually on here with us. He streamed. Todd and I've been together 5-6 years, I guess. And McMurray, he's another one McMurray's the one up in Chicago playing games at some tabletop place. But Todd can't be on there. He's got friends at home, but Todd's been on here, content creator for 13, 14 years, I guess. He's the one that actually it got me going. So I know he'd like to be here, and he's right. I mean, you've done. I think we've seen one other game that somebody dropped a history book in. Oh, and it slips my mind right off the top, but it was the the Battle of Bulge one.
Oh, yeah, the last
Yeah.
Blitzkrieg.
No, not that one. The one that Compass Games, the big one, the big monster.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah.
And everybody wanted that game just for that book. And I'm, and I'm looking at this one here. I mean, you guys out there, if you are getting this, I mean, come on, that's right there. That thing's worth $100 right there easily. So, and I'm gonna lay in bed at night and look at that thing and read that because it happens to me, and I don't know, maybe with you two also, maybe with a lot of gamers out there is like right now, what's happening to me is Ancients. And I didn't think I would go down. Thank you, Tim. Last Gamble.
Last Gamble. Yeah.
I didn't think I would go down that road of Ancients. I've got a lot of the GBOH stuff over there, but I look at the maps and the battlefields, and I'm like, come on, it's a freaking open field in there. Everybody's lined up in pretty forward line formations, and I couldn't see much of it. And then Warmutt, who just popped on here a second ago, he sent me a whole bunch of S&T magazine games, and I'm over there playing the Battle of Granicus. And yeah, it's wide open. It's just on a plain with a river in the middle of it. But it's interesting. The story, I started looking at the story of Alexander and the things that happened between 338 BC and 334. And I'm like, this is interesting stuff. So there's my bane that will pull me into some. So now I'm all over. I want Great Battles of Alexander. And fortunately, Mark Herman's kind enough. He's sending me a copy of his to play. So I'm going to start messing with it. It's funny how we go down these roads. You went down the Napoleonic road. You determined that was it. When you finally reached, okay, first off, when and what was your first design? And why did you decide to design?
So I guess I kind of got into the Labatai stuff, I think in the 90s sometime, and just that seemed to me to be the vehicle to really learn more about the period and how the pieces actually interacted with each other. And that's when I really started going down the rabbit hole of looking at the regulations and the other actual documentation of the period to find out how things actually worked. And so I was gonna been fiddling around with that, helping Ed with the making sense of the regs, the regulations, and how they matched up with his new Luton rules that he put in there.
Wimble,
Ed Wimble, yeah.
Wimble, okay, all right.
And then I was going to do a game on Grossbeeren, and then he suggested I do the remake on Borodino, and so that's what I did. My first game was the Labatai della Moscova 3rd edition, I think it is. For that.
And see, now that's where I associate your name, because I didn't have as much knowledge, but that's where I associate you with Labatai. So I guess I'm assuming Perry's asking about, is this new system, your Glory and Empire, is this based off something previous, or is it something new you came up with?
It's a similar scale to Labatai, and that there's a lot of similarities. How you form line.
You know what, Terry? Don't get me wrong, but Labatai. I know the community out there for Labatai. Okay, it's fairly large. I know some people from the GBACW world that are big in Labatai, but this is just my minor league player's opinion. Labatai can't touch what you're doing here. It's not even close to what you're doing here. And here's why I say this. I can sit here and take one of these, your first box is out. This box is getting ready to go out, or will be going out eventually. I can actually sit down and smoothly play through this, even at my level, okay? And I have put Labatai on a table, set it up, looked at it, took it down more times than I care to think, because too many rule sets to decide on. And then 2, I watch a lot of people play Labatai. And I'm sorry, I can't spend the whole day making 1 20-minute turn. I don't, or whatever. The game is too. Maybe it's supposed to be like that. I mean, you were part of it. Was it designed to be like that, or this system you've got now it seems to roll better, and you're getting everything in that needs to be in there?
Yeah, so there was a, yeah, so Labatai has been around for a long time, and it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so one of the things I found out, I basically everything I learned from people, from war gamers during my time working on Labatai, I kind of poured into this game, and that's kind of why you have the three rule sets, because there's so many different uh, viewpoints that people are coming from. So some people want something simple that they can get into right away and not have to worry too much about it, and that's the soldier's game. And then there's people that are super competitive, and they want everything to be ironclad and have no ambiguity, but they want a meteor game, and so that's kind of the battalion game. And so that's kind of what I'm striving for with the battalion game, is to kind of keep that solid, not really expand it too much, and keep the rules really tight so that people that are trying to play really competitively can uh, can do that without having to relearn things and having rules changes, break things. Um, and then the brigade game is for those people that they don't care about complexity. They don't care how long it takes. They want to learn more about the period, and they want all the detail they can possibly get. And even then, my overriding goal is to try and keep the mechanics as simple as possible. So even though they may be complex concepts, the actual mechanics themselves are are simple. So like fire combat is super simple. Cold steel combat is super simple. You basically have modifiers and things like that, and you roll some dice and you're done. And even the brigade game, I think the concepts, people are going to have a little bit of trouble wrapping their brain around it, just because it's foreign to the way we do things today in terms of military stuff, and people aren't really that familiar with it. But I think as more people understand it, uh, it'll become easy, and it's really fairly simple once you grasp what's going on in terms of how it's moving on the tabletop, and what it means in real life, as far as maneuvering the units. So I had my guys that were helping me review things and stuff. I was always having to, rein things back and say, no, that's too complex. We can't go there. We have to keep it simple so that people can actually play it. Because the goal is to actually get it on the table and play it, and not just have it sit on a shelf and look pretty.
Right. Like the concept, you mentioned about that, and I looked at the rules, and I was, first time I looked at them, I jumped to the back because I wanted the details. You had
Mhm.
wheeling in there, and I'm like, oh, great, I've never seen this this level of game in there. And somebody look at it initially might say, oh God, that's too technical. I read it and I was like, oh, this is really not that bad. It follows
Yeah.
the concept just like you were doing it if you were a reenactor, or if you're doing anything with that. If you know line infantry, if you follow and read, the tactics of the time, um, it'll make perfect sense to you pretty quickly. And even if you don't, I think it's something that you'll learn that concept pretty quickly from it.
And
So,
Alan, you and I are getting a great taste of this because of, well, one with Mark Herman's game, maneuver at a different scale, and then with the GBACW with the simple. So we're getting to go. I'm going to solo this for a second. So what? So when you guys get this, all right, there's your core rules, and I'm going to ask you a question about this here in just a second, Terry. And nobody's done this. So, and inside the core rules, you're going to see the colors at the bottom. There's three sections. All right, you've got your soldiers, which is going to be the orange, and then you're going to get to your battalion game, which is the red, which is going to be like your medium, and then you're going to get to the green. The green is going to be your brigade for all of you all that want the super details. And I I don't. I mean, you could have done that better. Now, what I want to know is how did you determine the breaking point at each set of rules? I mean, how did you say, okay, no, I need to cut soldiers' rules off at this, and then battalion, and then brigade? How did you? I mean, how much of a thought process? How long did you take trying to determine that?
Yeah, I think I kind of just thought, that what's the bare minimum I need to do for the soldiers game to have a good Napoleonic game that looks and feels like a Napoleonic game. So you got to have your line, column, and square. There are some things that are probably less, going to be less accurate in the soldiers game. And then the battalion game is basically, well, what do I need to have a much more accurate Napoleonic game, but not necessarily overwhelm you with additional chrome and details. And so then all the chrome and details kind of went into the brigade game, except for the command rules, of course, which are unique and enough meat there that people should be should probably try the battalion game at least before they jump into those, and kind of get the basics of the system down, so they can move on to that a little more easily.
Yeah, and like I said, the provisions you made for that are great, because I mean, the heavy grognards of Napoleonics, they're going to want that brigade system. They're going to those are the guys. We're probably not going to walk into any gaming store that plays war games and see a whole bunch of guys doing that. But there's a group out there that loves that depth. And there's times when we were discussing this with the Great Battles of American Civil War. I doubt I will ever set up a full Gettysburg game and play the full rules of GBACW ever again. I'll use the simple system because I want to get through the battle. Now, you've done that in one rule book where I can set up a whole battle. And like I say, I'm sorry, but this well, I'm not sorry. This is good. This system flows. Right now, I'm just messing soldiers because I got to refresh myself again, and I will go to battalion. Will I go to brigade? I don't know. But you're doing some videos right now, which thank God you are. And I can't wait to see people when they get their hands on this box, people that start playing the brigades, and we get that one or two players out there that start putting some videos, and they start digging up on these rules and how this wheeling and how these shifting of lines and changing of formations and squares, how that stuff works at that real deep level. I think it's going to be it's going to be extremely interesting, for one. So I can pick up, and I think anybody's going to be able to pick up this box. First off, the text is nice and large and legible and readable. And I'm learning, which we've learned with Nathan Landrum's simple GBACW rules. And I told Alan this the other night. If the rule's not in there in the book, it's not to be used. And you clarified that with me with, I think, the withdrawal before combat, the 13.4, that it's referenced in the sequence of play, but it's not in the rule for soldier rule, so it does not apply. To me, this is a change in people developing rules, and I think this is great.
That's this card here.
Yeah,
that card.
Do me a favor, because I never get this right. On that card, you got the Shaco or the whatever it is, and you got the tricorn or
bicorn.
I never get that right. What do those represent again?
The Shaco means it applies to the battalion and brigade game, and then the bicorn means it just applies to the brigade game.
Okay, so the Shaco does apply to the.
Is that upside down? Okay. No, that looks right.
Yeah, and then you've got the assault procedures on there. I think you got some stuff on the back that I don't think I've had.
Charge procedure and reaction charge procedure. Yeah.
All right. Have you read Nikolai Okunyev's book there that Mike asks?
No, I haven't read that. I've read there's quite a few. I'm assuming that's a period book. There's quite a few of those, and I've read some of those that talk about those combined arms for various. And a guy named Decker had written one, and a British fellow whose name escapes me at the moment had written a similar kind of book. But there's quite a few of those during the period. Okay. And so that's the thing about Napoleonic tactics too. Is like everybody has their theory on how they work. And so did everybody during the Napoleonic period, and none of them agreed, and people still don't agree. So there we are.
There we go. Somebody just ordered it. Pete, good deal. I hope you loved the first one. Good. I'm glad to hear that. There we go. Speak of the ancient one himself. We're gonna have Mark. We're challenging Mark in his game. Alan and I. We're gonna play him 2 against 1, probably here in the month of May. So. I'll tell you another thing too. What I'd like to do with you is when a little while down the road here. So I know you told us when. So the pre-order or whatever Kickstarter, it ends when?
June 7th is the plan. Although that's just kind of a soft date.
Right.
That's kind of when I need to tell the printer to go ahead in order to make the date of getting games in people's hands by September, October.
Okay, so September, October.
Assuming the world doesn't go nuclear before then, but.
Yep. Mark, I meant to respond to that. Mark, thank you so much. What a stud, all right. Yeah, Pete, I agree. The skirmish formation. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad Pete brought that up. Okay, because we were having this talk the other night. So I remember when I did your first game. Okay, a lot of people were like, and I remember because I think you commented on one of the posts. And the funny thing is, I see you doing it in the videos you're shooting now. I do not put the SK markers in front of the unit. I understand what those skirmishers are doing, and I had to think about it for, well, why would I put SK markers in front? Well, we were talking about the range thing, the 2 or 3 if they have rifles. So if you put the skirmisher marker 1 hex in front of its company or battalion or whatever, you're helping yourself with that reaction fire, in my opinion, by having the skirmishers.
It's kind of a reminder of that, and partly I do it just so it doesn't obscure the unit, so you can see it easier.
I figured, because I want to say I remember you saying in the first one here, no, I mean, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing it, but put your skirmishers on top of the unit. Because and the reason why I say this is because the skirmishers have that -1, that informational stuff on it. If you don't have that sitting on top of the unit, you might boo-boo and not use the right modifier. So this is another strong thing about this game. You made the counters very good size. I don't think they're overly large. They're clean, they're clear. And then you made the informational stuff to represent what's going on with them smaller, to put them on top so you can still see that there's a unit underneath. Love that.
Yeah.
Love the information that's on there. Yeah, I need you to, because Mark tried to do this, and the website defeated him on trying to get a pre-order on that.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. You can try and email me at I think it's contact@oldguardpublishing.com, and you can see what's going on there and get that fixed.
Yeah, because we need I've already seen people have already messaged me. I probably had a dozen people message me about the pre-order, and some that have done it, and some that are trying to get over there and do it. I mean, I've got what you've sent me, and this is a good looking. Plus, I noticed on this one too, you've got a lot more. There's a lot more footprint with this game.
There is, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a pricey game, but it's only $45 more than First Victories, and it's 5 maps as opposed to 1.5 maps. And compared to some of the other big games out there, and it's relatively cheap and outweighs a lot of the other big games out there. That comes in at 10 pounds.
Yeah, see, we're getting a lot of this. These heavy ass games coming in. I'm thinking people are doing this.
10 pounds, geez.
Yeah, we got a 12-pound Gettysburg box coming.
Like that, yeah.
Terry, will there be a re-release of your first game through Lock and Load by chance?
I have no idea. I haven't heard from those guys since First Victories was released, so I don't know what they're up to.
It would be,
People have asked me if I'm going to reprint Rolla and Vimiero. If I did, I'd probably do them as separate games, and then I'd have to work with L&L on that. Since that was contracted to them.
Yeah, so it's going to have to. I mean, if you're a collector, I mean, I'm not seeing Volume 1 or Volume 2 on these. Do you plan on? Because I know darn well. I'll just take a shot in the dark here. You probably got 4 or 5 that you're working on for the future already.
Yeah, so I've got a little bit of a pipeline going. And,
so
the next one will hopefully be Shevardino, which is the 2 days before the Battle of Borodino, which a guy named Jeff Besovich is working on. And he can read Russian, so he's got access to a lot of Russian sources that were inaccessible to me. And plus, I guess a lot more has become available online as far as Russian sources since then. So he got access to a lot more material than I could have. So
he's done it. Russia. So you're going from end to end, huh?
Yeah. So he's got, and you'll see the Portuguese Legion guys show up there. So
okay.
Is there going to be more Portugal in this theater? Do you have more ready for this theater? Or
so when I first started the system long ago, I did 4 game designs to kind of test it in various situations, and the Rolla Vimiero ended up being in one package instead of separate games. And then I also did Fuentes de Onoro, which was a basic game design, and then Salamanca. So probably some point in the future I'll do Salamanca, but we're gonna move over to Central and Eastern Europe. So we're gonna go to Shevardino, then we'll probably do Auerstadt, which another designer is working on that. And then I've also got in the works a game on Castiglione, which is in 1796, in August 5th,
Right.
1796, in northern Italy. And then I'm also working on a little Battle of Trenton, New Jersey. So
Oh,
bringing
yeah,
some
here.
revolutionary stuff
American Revolution.
with
Huh? Yeah.
George Washington
Do you
and
do
Von
you
Rahl.
do you sleep and eat dinner and you take naps? I mean,
I do. I'm just a productive person, I guess, but
He dreams this. When he sleeps,
get a lot done.
He's
So
making
my big
rules.
bottleneck is maps. So if somebody wants to help do maps, they can volunteer and get some free games
Okay.
out of it,
Oh, and
I'm a
or even
GIS.
maybe even get paid. But
I'm a GIS guy.
oh, you are
I
okay.
had 22 years doing that stuff, but I'm not gonna lie to you, I've
Wow.
never gotten into doing a game map thing. So
So my process right now is, which we pioneered with First Victories, was taking GIS data, and that kind of got started because some of the old maps were just really inaccurate.
Mm.
And also it helped us to create the LOS system, which I'm surprised there hasn't been more questions on that, but that's
I
kind of why
don't
I did
struggle with
that
that
white
for some
paper.
reason. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of game systems have. All right, so here, let's just make this a basic statement here. If okay, all right, so you've already pointed out, which you put it in your rules, and this is great. A lot of people don't do this. The center point of the hex, if a unit is sitting in a hex, whatever the elevation is at the center point is the elevation where the unit is.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So here's one of the basics that you get out of a lot, and because Al and I do this a lot with the Civil War stuff. If you have woods that only cover 2/3 of a hex, and I'm shooting cannons down the edge of that woods, and when I draw a straight line to my target, it goes into that hex, but it doesn't touch those woods. Do you still consider the woods to be blocking line of sight, covering the whole hex, or am I free to shoot?
So that generally I take a conservative approach, because generally the battery mostly occupies the whole width of the hex, and so if some of it can shoot, but not all of it, they're probably not going to shoot, because they want to make sure they have a good target. So I take the conservative approach and block it in most cases
Okay.
if the terrain is partially blocked.
And for the life
Because we're not doing sniper fire, it's volley fire, right? So
Yeah.
Right, yeah, multiple.
That's what I was going to say. You've got a line of a couple hundred guys trying to
yeah,
put fire on there. So yeah.
yeah, and the commander during this period, they're not going to fire their muskets unless they're sure it's going to be useful.
Yeah.
Skirmishing is different. They can fire all day and do what they have to do, but that's why within the skirmish zone you don't require an LOS. So like in the soldiers game,
the casualty system works good on this because it's not. I don't know. I'm starting to grow fond of systems that I don't have to put a strength marker under every damn unit that takes a hit.
Yeah.
You guys are, not if this is a compliment or not, but you designers have gotten so much smarter with this, and we're falling in love with a bunch of systems that are doing it. So I like this. You really got to get a super die roll. I get it. Black powder, it's close range. Muskets aren't the most accurate thing in the world. You got to really get a high roll to get matter of fact, I don't think I've rolled when I was playing this scenario, which I messed it all up by showing that stuff off the other night. I think I might have had one that took an actual step flip.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's reasons behind that. So if you look at like the Battle of Fuentes de Onoro, the actual casualties of the units, I don't think there was a single unit that suffered even 10% casualties. So
wow.
So if you've got 6 strength points, one strength point is more than 10%, right? So they're really generally not taking that many casualties unless something catastrophic happens, like they get run down by cavalry and they break and a whole bunch of them get scooped up by prisoners, or during close combat where they're at really close range and they get potentially mass casualties. But for the most part, they're not taking huge casualties, at least until you get to the Central European battles in Borodino, where you've got these huge grand batteries of 100 cannon just blasting large swaths of territory. And that's covered in the brigade game under the bombardment zone kind of thing, where everybody in that zone is going to get blasted.
Why did you choose not to? I get it. Try maybe simplifying things down a little bit, but because the information's on the counters, regardless of which rule set you play, why did you take? I mean, the chart's simple. Why did you take using the different types of ammunition off of the soldier's plate, even though they're on the counter. Because I mean, I get for simplification, but I'm thinking, looking at the fire charts and everything, it's not really. I don't think it's any harder to add.
It's just another level of detail that kind of slows down play. So it's not just about complexity, but it's about the amount of time it takes to play. So I think like if you're familiar with the rules for Rolissa, or familiar with the rules for the Soldiers or Battalion game, you could play Rolissa and Vimiero in real time, unless you're one of those guys that you have to really think about every counter you move. Then you can play pretty quickly, and a lot of that came out of like I said, my experience with La Bataille in terms of sitting at conventions and watching people wrestle with stuff as I'm teaching them the game. And boy, how can I just make this quicker
Simple.
playing by doing these simple things like getting rid of the strength point counting, and having step losses and not having to look at the back of the counter and pick it up every time you need to do something.
Oh, yeah,
So
La
and
Bataille.
then
That's,
shuffling all the charts. So
I mean, that's
for the most part,
great to hear. That's really good to hear. I mean, this is now the second time actually probably third time we've heard this with designers, thinking about, I don't want to say speed of play, but the flow of the play and keeping it moving along.
and not stopping. Yeah, I mean, when I do La Bataille at conventions, it's like, I'm going to fire, shuffle the papers, do the fire. Oh, I need to take a morale tech, shuffle the papers, to find the morale chart. And plus you're picking up the unit each time you want to look at their fire strength and each time you want to look at their morale value. And that just, all that stuff, it's not a big deal, but it just slows things way down.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the reason for putting some things in the battalion game and some things in the brigade game is especially if you see the optional rules, they'll say this significantly slows play. So that's why it's optional. And you might want to not use it if you want to get through the game in a hurry, particularly if it's a big game. Fuentes de Onoro is still pretty manageable with 50,000 guys per side.
Your color coding on these units. Now, I had Eric from Eric's Tabletop, Eric Holmgren. He explained to me, because I think the first time I noticed it was in the Revolution game they were playing from one of the BAR games. So the colors of the counters, I'm sure, are you jacket, midriff, and trousers. Is that how you did them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
similar style.
I struggle like I'm looking over the game right there, and I mean I see these guys with the red tops, and I'm like, well, I know those are British more than likely, and then the blue and the white, I'm pretty sure a lot of that's going to be the French, but then you'll get those like maybe the Spanish in there or the Portuguese in there, and I'm not
the Royal Horse Artillery
on their uniforms. So for the people out there that you get this, what's the easy identifying mark on a counter to say, hey, they're on that side or this side?
On this side or that side? Probably just getting the command displays and looking at it. So typically, the corps have a color stripe at the top, and the French are organized by corps. And then the middle color stripe is usually the division, although there's some cavalry brigades that might have that. And then the bottom color is usually the brigade, although I let the Scots have one there, and they have their tartans, whatever their tartan color is on the Scots. So that might confuse some people, but I mean, it was a real problem during the period as well. So identifying enemy units. And there were some friendly fire incidents in this game.
So the Allies don't have the top stripe on any of the.
Yeah, they're organized by division, so that they wouldn't adopt the corps system until later.
Okay, well, that enlightens me. There's so much. It's fun. There's a lot of information on the counters, but it's so. But I can read it. It's funny because it didn't take me long to figure out. Hey, this number is their strength point when they're doing CV or cold steel, or whatever. The subscript is the number of skirmishers they can kick out. The white box, the firing, the pink box. I don't have to go look any of it. I think the only thing that I had to look when I was playing this was, wait a minute, isn't there a CVM or something in the green box thingy that means something? And the ones I didn't have to do that anymore. The artillery is simple to handle. yellow background, white background, can't be any easier. We're not thinking about, hey, this guy's got 2 Whitworths, 6 10-pound Napoleons, and a couple of 3-inch rifles. I don't have to think about that. They pretty much all had one thing, didn't they? Back in those days.
Oh yeah, that definitely gets tedious to have to look up a unit in the rule book somewhere and find out what kind of munitions it has, and you definitely want to have that on the encounter.
Now,
so definitely a lot of use of color to help people remember and jog their memory of
right.
what things mean and where to find things. But
like, okay, so first off, I appreciate this. I love chit draw. All right. What flipped your light switch to go from those cards and the first one to chit draw?
oh, you're talking about the solo bot?
Yeah.
So partly, so when I did the solo bot, that was David Heath had asked me to do that, and I hadn't really given that much thought before on how that would work. And he said they wanted something similar to what they had with Nations at War and World at War 85, that they've got their bot system there. So that's what I used the cards from, and if I recall correctly, they had licensed that from somebody else. So I couldn't really use that in a new new game under my own label. So I switched to the chit draw. And the other reason I did that is just because the cards take a lot of space in the box.
Oh yes, they do. They do.
So they could be more expensive to print probably too than the chits.
I don't think they're that much more really, but making the box another inch taller would add to the shipping cost quite a bit, and add to the shelf space quite a bit.
Well, to me, the counters, one, storage, right? But I think the counter cards are going to wear out with me. So I figure a chit's going to last a lot longer than a counter or a card is going to last. And I'm not into all this. I'm not going to take 300 cards and stick them in protectors. Just not going to.
Yeah, some people will do that. Yeah.
I bought a Vegas card shuffling machine just to play those games, with all the cards to shuffle. But I love the chit draw. I think chit draw is one of the greatest mechanics to ever be installed in game systems. It's a great fog of war, in my opinion, too. So here we go. Just historical question, because I haven't gone down this road yet. Did Loisan ever freaking take Fuente de Onoro?
It depends on which side you believe. So both sides at times claimed that they had taken the village. The British say they never took it, but I think part of it's it depends on which part of the village you talk about. So the French apparently had got hold of the lower part of the village, which I think is what they mean is the little tail that hangs off down towards the south there, and it had managed to stay in there. And so they claim they got hold of that part of the village and kept it. And the British say, well, no, they never got a hold of the village because they didn't get a hold of the upper part of the village where the church is. And so it's a little bit of a, bragging rights, I guess, in terms of
who got
which
side. Who got to the high water mark.
Hey, we'll be discussing that soon.
So there's the initial attack on May 3rd, which is the scenario 1 and scenario 2. And then Massena on May 4th had decided it was too big a nut to crack going directly against the British Army, because off to the left of the village there is basically the rest of the British Army, other than the guys that are up on the north map. And so there's a big mass of guys over there with quite a bit of artillery and some cavalry. So then Massena decided to go south, and so they found a route across the river there, the Turones, or the Dos Casas, and then came up from the south. And then on the 5th, also they attacked Fuentes de Onoro with some elements of the 6th Corps, Ferre's division, and the 9th Corps under Lecomte d'Erlon. And they got a little bit further on that day, but still were not able to hold the village. So one thing Wellington did on the 4th is he pulled all those light companies out and sent them back to their parent units, and then put a handful of other units from the 3rd Division in there, just regular battalions. And that was the garrison. But as the French pressure mounted, he sent most of those light companies back into the village to reinforce it, which was, I think, it was kind of a preview of what he would do at Waterloo, in the same way with the Chateau Hougoumont, where he sent some light companies there and kept reinforcing it throughout the day to draw off French strength.
Well, your explanation was great about okay, so So if I would have set this up and you had not put the rules in there, I would have been struggling with command right off the bat. But I'm hoping I gave a good explanation saying that while the British forces while there's no leader on the map, they have like a garrison leader that's sort of there, and everybody.
Yeah, and in reality, there was a garrison leader,
Okay.
who the first one got killed and he was replaced by somebody else, but he was just a colonel from one of the regiments.
So everybody that was within the walls of Fuentes de Onoro, they're considered in command. Now,
Yeah.
I stretched my legs and decided to attack out on the upper side of the French line.
Mhm.
Bad idea, because I decided to go after those cannons up there, and that just wasn't a good idea. But then I realized once I did that, and I think this is what when my question to you the other night was about, if the British are fortunate enough to draw 2 orders, which it only happened the one time, could the whole garrison be in attack, but we take one stack that's in Fuentes and put them in reserve for reactionary movement? And,
no, that's not currently in the rules to do that. That's an interesting idea, but I hadn't had.
well, I mean, I guess I think what I was more trying to understand was, could that garrison leader possibly have been smart enough to do that or think like that? I guess more, or was this, more like, nope, Wellington says I'm doing this, that's what I'm doing.
Well, I mean, they probably would maintain local reserves within the village, so in order to backstop any advance from the enemy and maybe counterattack if necessary, and that's just a normal part of the combat process, and but not really like a high level command function that the reserve order is kind of intended to be.
Well, I know that I'm gonna, as soon as I get done with Granicus over there, which that game isn't doing much for me over there. I think it's just too old and too dated. I'm away from Mark. When Mark's game gets, I'm gonna drag him on and I'm gonna have him walk through some of that GBOA with me. I think I want to get something bigger over there on that table, on my table in my other room, and stretch this out a little farther. I don't, and I will tell everybody out there, while the solo system is put in there, what do we call the solo system in this again?
I'm now calling it aide de camp.
Aide de camp. Okay. I personally I'm only looking at this scenario here. You can solo this completely without having to use that if you want to play yourself head to head against yourself.
Yeah,
I don't think
somebody online had actually in First Victories had used the solo bot to play both sides, and it seemed to work out okay. But so this
Right.
solo bot's a little bit different. It's a little less random than the card draw in First Victory. So we'll see what people think of it, but it should still work fairly well. Maybe a little more logically than and a little less random than the other one.
Another
Okay, so
sale.
you've pulled out some,
We're selling your game here. Come on.
Thank you.
you've pulled out
Yeah.
another. You've pulled out some of the randomness and this more structure to the solo, the aide de camp solo mode. You're
Yeah.
saying so. Even though you have chit draw as part of that, there's a sequence or progression that you need to go through that will fit to the tactics of the side.
So basically in this iteration, so there was the concept of a battle plan in the first game, right? So you drew up a battle plan which would kind of
Yep.
show, and I had a bunch of examples for each scenario in each of those where you could either draw up your own battle plan or use one of the pre-made battle plans, and the bot would have to try and stick to that. And so this one, there was kind of based on the card draws, how you'd follow that and the priority of execution for the moves for each one. And so this one, you still have the battle plan, so you're following the battle plan, but you basically kind of have a proximity to the enemy that you're keeping track of. And if the enemy shows up maybe on your flank or something like that, then that creates a change of situation that the
Okay.
bot can react to. And so it depends on the commander's awareness. So you roll on a table to see if he can react to the situation, and then you roll again to see on another table to see what kind of reaction he makes. So that
Is that what the letter? Because I haven't gotten into that yet. The letter on the chits, A, M, and C.
That stands for the kind of the nature of the commander, whether he's aggressive, moderate, or cautious.
Okay.
And so that's just a way to kind of inform the player of how the leader should react, whether he should be aggressive in his attacks or moderate or cautious. And, so like an aggressive leader would send everybody in on an assault when he gets a chance. And a moderate guy might send half his guys, and a cautious guy might just send one or two, or maybe even just change position and not attack. But,
Right.
So is it fair to say, it sounds like that you've put in more, at least from the bot's perspective, it has more understanding of what's around it, immediately around it, and what's happening around it that it'll react to. And then you still have the battle plan, which I saw from the first victories. That's the overall plan of attack for the core. Is that kind of a summary of what you're
so if
saying?
we take first victory, so your battle plan for the French would be basically, march on Vimiero, either from the front, the flank, or the other flank, or a combination of those. And so the bot would be following those. But if the British just stay in position, then the bot's not really going to react until it gets close, and
Gotcha.
and firing starts to take place. And then, but say the British send a flanking, so if they send somebody down from a ridge to get on their flank, then that's going to cause the change of situation that the bot commanders can basically react to. And the chit draws just kind of randomize the order in which the bot is responding, so that create unpredictable situations for the player.
Alan,
That's
we
cool.
always read and understand about how where the hand-to-hand fighting in the Civil War wasn't quite as much as we're probably led to believe. Over time that they realized that was not the right approach at all times.
Yeah.
And in this system, Terry, you make the statement in it's in the rules or whatever that the whole premise of taking positions in this game is that close assault is getting in
It is
there.
close assault, yeah. And it's I've spent a bit of time. Dave Powell's a friend of mine, Civil War guy, and we've talked a fair amount about this stuff, and we both agree that the change in musketry between now and the Civil War then just made that so costly during the Civil War that they just stopped doing that. In this period, it's not, I guess it's the range probably of where the rifles become effective. So in this period, you're not getting really effective fire until you're getting down to like 50 yards. In terms of volley fire. For skirmishers, they can fire farther away because they're actually taking time to aim. In this period, they're not really taught to aim, so they're just blasting away basically as quickly as they can, and with smoke that created from the bad black powder that they have and the misfires and all kinds of other things. They're just not that accurate, so they don't really get a lot of hits until they get close to that. Into 50-yard range. So that's kind of the assumption is there, and that's what the well-directed fire is. They hold their fire until they get to close range and are able to deliver their volleys effectively, and they didn't panic.
I like that rule too, where you roll if they pass that morale check. They get
and that's kind of
bonus
rolled into one morale check, determining whether they or panic and whether or not they deliver their fire effectively, which if you wanted to do something more complicated, you could make that 2 separate morale checks to decide if that happens. But that again, adds time and complexity. But
in this scenario here, the French need that to break inside.
The well-directed fire, yeah.
Yeah, to get to shoot into that building. All right, so we've been going a little over an hour and a half. So I want to wrap this up, but I have 2 questions left that I want to ask you. I've been saving one of these. I've been saving both of these. All right. First question. And Terry, when we close out, do me a favor, don't leave the chat. I'm going to talk to you after we close the show out.
Okay.
What other systems, we know Labatai, what other systems have you had your hand in design?
That's probably the main one. I haven't really worked with too much else, so been fairly focused on that kind of stuff, that level of battalion scale game.
Well, that answers the Napoleonics rabbit hole question. So. Here comes the big one. Alan, do you have any other questions before I pop this one?
I'm working on an operational scale system also in the background, but.
Oh, really?
Oh, interesting. Napoleonic operation.
Napoleonic, yeah.
Yeah.
Although it could apply to anything in the horse and musket period.
Okay.
I'll tell you who's not here tonight is Nord.
Yeah, Nord's missing out. We gotta.
He's usually always.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
He's another Napoleonics guy. If you haven't seen him on our show, Terry.
Yeah, they love the Library of Napoleonic Battles, and I do. I think it's a good system. All right,
that's
here
a good
we go.
system, yeah.
last question, and then we're going to say goodnight to the crowd out here. Why Old Guard Publishing?
Oh, well, basically just to try and get more games out there is the main reason. So kind of, everybody knows the delay in getting First Victories out. I think it took about, 3.5 years to actually get it into people's hands.
No, why the name? Why'd you choose the name?
Oh, why the name? Just because it's Old Guard, man.
Well, I'm kind of saying it puts you on one side of the fence if you ask me that it's the French side all the way.
Well, yeah, probably.
Good straight out the show. I love it. Well, Terry, look, hey, all you guys out there in the chat, I appreciate y'all popping on here with that. Terry, have you ever done a live stream before?
I've been. I did a few things with people for First Victories. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can see we're going to be dragging you back on here. I figure.
Oh yeah.
Sometime as this thing starts to get closer to closing out on sell dates, and then before it gets into people's hands, we get
a Vassal module coming.
Oh yeah, I want to ask you about that.
There is a Vassal module. I need to update it for the solo assistant, but it's
is the straight up play part of that working?
Yeah. So you can do the Marshall's game, and you can do all the scenarios and stuff. So yeah, I can get that to you.
Yeah, because I think Al and I could that would be good for him and I to do a great rundown inside. So
I got to beat Hexy at something. He's beating me too much these days. I got to beat him at something.
We're even up now, aren't we? So it's all right. We're going to get our asses handed to us by Mark Herman here in a couple of weeks. Well, hey, everybody out there, thank y'all for showing on. Lots of good questions and input out there. Terry, man, it was just, I appreciate the daylights out of this. This was so nice to get you on here. And we didn't even have to talk about the game, just to get you. And I kind of knew that with what I see and what you've developed, that to me, a history lesson was going to be more valuable to me than just discussing the game. Just so many things you've shared tonight in just this short little time that I would imagine a lot of people in chat, Alan and myself, just not aware of. And, just a little more spark for Napoleonic. So thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah.
Everybody out there, thank you
great
all.
Fun.
And we'll post up.
My pleasure to blab about this stuff.
And there's your link right there, guys. oldguardpublishing.com. $175 worth every freaking penny. I'm telling you, every component in this box is legitimate and well done. And we'll see you all hopefully Saturday night. Talk to you later.
Yeah.